Welcome to the What is Smart podcast. We dive deep into the ever-evolving world of intelligence, learning, and success. Join us as we engage with leading educators, psychologists, technologists, and thinkers, unraveling insights and challenging old notions. From EQ to creativity, from tech savviness to social awareness, What is Smart is your guide to understanding intelligence in the 21st century. Let's change education together. What's going on, everybody? This is Garrett here from What is Smart. What is Smart is brought to you by the Gardens Foundation, www.thegardensfoundation.org. You're going to see it go across your screen. I need you to stop what you're doing. Billy, I don't even know if there's a Billy, but Billy, if you're sitting on the couch right now watching, reruns of Cheers, please stop. Please go to thegardensfoundation.org. Go to the donate section. Donate. We need help when it comes to changing the future of education. We need learners to be empowered to be successful for the future, and you can help. You can go, you can buy merch. We have What is Smart shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies. We're working on hats. It's a great movement. It's a great question to ask at parties. You're wearing it. Somebody's like, oh my gosh, what is smart? Great question. That starts a great conversation. Please visit www.thegardensfoundation.org. And I cannot wait for Lainie Rowell, our guest today. Let's do it. Welcome to What is Smart, guys. We redefine intelligence and explore the future of education. Today, we are thrilled to have Lainie Rowell, I hope I said that right, with us. Lainie is a best-selling author, award-winning educator, and TEDx speaker. I had a longer intro, guys. But I want you to know that this person already started off amazing with me with a lack of ego and saying, yeah, cut that down. Nobody cares what I do. I thought that was the best thing you could possibly say. But welcome, Lainie, to What is Smart. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me, Garrett. And I'm going to really try and match your energy. I love it.
I try. I'm an old guy. I'm 43 years old, 5 kids. Pushing through life, trying to keep the energy up is the name of the game, and C4 energy drink. I don't know if you've discovered that, but it's great. That stuff is great. Who knows what's in it? But
I don't think you want to see me on it. I can't even drink caffeine. It's
oh, really?
It's not pretty. No. Keep me even.
Oh, wow. I love it. What do you drink in the morning?
Water.
Oh my God, she's a water. Oh my goodness, guys. Take notes. Everybody drink more water. More water.
It's only because I don't like drinking water that if I start with caffeine, I'm going to get dehydrated and be all over the place. And so I figure if I start with water, there's a better chance I will drink it throughout the day.
Now there's got to be a vice, and we'll get into the show. Trust me, guys. I already like this start, but there's got to be a vice there. Diet Coke.
Okay. There used to be. I used to have 3 Diet Cokes before breakfast. And I had a doctor explain to me why that was not an epic move. And so no sodas, but I do like tea. And I mean, awesome. If I'm feeling really crazy, a decaf coffee from Starbucks.
Don't tell anybody, guys. Don't you tell anybody.
Wow.
I've had decaf before, sometimes just for the taste, right? We're all addicted to something. But thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, here we have the team in the lab, in the space lab, if you will, looking for folks out there that have an interesting perspective on the question, what is smart? Your name came up. Then we went and checked your website, checked out your content. Love what you're doing. You're an author. You spoke at TEDx events. I think that's amazing. But much more, what's important to me is your focus on, 1, personalized education for learners, but 2, the most important thing, which is empowering educators to be better educators. And so we're going to start there. We always start with an origin story, like an X-Men #1 of how Lainie got to education. Was it like a clear path, or was it a shift midway through life? We're super interested in that. And then, of course, what led you to then focusing the majority of your work on empowering educators and really motivating educators out there to be better selves for their learners. One of the things I'll preface is, one of the things that I love that you've said is, we can't expect a better learner without working on ourselves first, because that's how the stickiest learning happens. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but please, Lainie, tell our viewers and listeners how you got into all of this.
Yeah, so I'll try and keep it brief, but basically, I was a psych major and I was placed in a non-public school as my field hours. I ended up working in a classroom with students with special needs, and I fell in love with being in a classroom in a much different way than when I was actually a student in a classroom. In fact, I would say I'm a good learner. I was not a good student. And so I did not fit into that role well. I did not do well in a traditional role. So
Ditto.
if I could say that my parents, when I went to tell them I was going to be an educator, I mean, that was the biggest changing lanes without signaling in the history of anything. Like they could not have seen any other path would have made sense to them. This was so like they had to bribe me to get good grades in school, and I still only did okay. And it was a shock to them. But I fell in love with working with kids and how we could do things to remove barriers and meet the needs of all learners. And like I said, I started in a school that was focused on learners with special needs. And so I was actually planning on going into special education. I had a family member say, don't do that yet, because once you go into special education, they're never going to let you leave. If you go into general education and really hone your skill, then you can go and serve the special education population better. And I thought, well, that makes a lot of sense. And once I was in a gen ed classroom, I realized that there are barriers for all learners, and we all have unique needs. We all have preferences for learning. And I really fell in love with how can we remove the barriers for all learners? And one of the first ways that I really saw that happening was through technology. And I eventually was hired at a brand new school. I mean, like couple years in, I was hired at a brand new school. We didn't have a lot of technology, but of course it was a huge investment because it was a one-time massive purchase compared to what some of the other schools had. Again, not a lot, but it felt like a lot in this district. And I really, like I said, I just fell in love with how technology could help remove barriers. And so, a long story short, I ended up being so passionate about it that my principal asked me to co-teach and do demonstrations in other teachers' classrooms, try and help, remove their barriers to bringing technology into the classroom. And that, like I said, long story short, that ended up leading to a district level position. And then I ended up being offered a consulting role with Apple. And I left my district and worked for Apple and other organizations for, well, till now. And so it's been about 13 years. I'm honored to say I still get into classrooms to work with kids and adults. And
Amazing.
I'm just, there's a lot of things that I talk about, and hopefully we'll get into some of those. But yeah, so that's kind of, I don't think that was very short, but anyway.
No, it was, I mean, we've had epic stories, in how people, so there's no right or wrong when it comes to all of that. One of the links I did kind of hear in that is this one, starting your path out in special needs. How interesting is it that a lot of the techniques used in, working with special needs, autism, BCBA work, when you're doing a lot of this kind of documentation, isn't it interesting? Or do you see the parallels of, tracking and documenting a child's day via goals, I guess? We talk about IEPs and 504s in classes. Why don't all students have those things? Do you see that link or correlation when it comes to your special needs background in the work you're doing in personalized learning today? I have an autistic stepson.
Yeah.
So it's very, very interesting how this all is kind of coming to play, where a lot of these techniques have been used in the past.
I think what I would say is that what I have come to believe, and I definitely want to give Apple credit. I mean, I came to Universal Design for Learning through them. I mean, they universally design all of their workshops. I was explicitly doing Universal Design for Learning workshops. And so I think where I've come to be is you assume variability. You assume that, right? Variability is the norm, not the exception. That's something the community says a lot. And so
We're getting the inside of the Apple community.
Well, I mean, I'm more specifically the Universal Design for Learning community. It
Yeah,
often
for sure.
that, and I think Barbara Pape might be the first person to say that phrase. I want to
Love it.
properly attribute, but I
Thank
think
you.
just thinking about that we all come with different needs and preferences. And so when we design, if we design knowing that, and so I try not to say, well, I know this child has this specific need. I'm going to assume that other kids in the room are going to have that need, or at least a preference that would be served by accommodating that need. And so really trying to think about what are the ways that I can remove as many barriers as possible. I want to be able to serve everyone in the room. And I think it helps. And Garrett, it sounds like you're with me on this. Like, I did not have an amazing K-12 experience. Now, to be clear, that doesn't mean I didn't have amazing K-12 teachers, but I did not seem to fit into that system.
To interrupt super quick, sorry. This is my high school report card. I graduated with a 1.8 from high school. Isn't it funny the work I do today? So yes, I did not.
So you changed lanes without signaling too, right? Yeah.
That's exactly right. We have a lot in common.
Yeah. So yeah, I just want to assume that I can remove barriers by doing things in different ways. And a huge part of that is never assuming that people want to learn the way that I want to learn. And this is the lesson that I have to learn over and over and over again, because my default as an instructional designer is to do things how I would want them done. And so I have to assume that maybe my default preference, and it would change day to day, but maybe even minute to minute, but maybe I tend to like to listen to podcasts or listen to audio. Maybe that's the way that I like to learn. But I can't assume that everyone likes that. So what are other ways? And this is how I think technology excels is can I offer a video? Can I offer an audio? Can I offer a piece of text? Can I offer an infographic? And I think sometimes teachers hear that and I don't blame them. It feels overwhelming. Like, wait, now I need to do like way more work. And I think between AI and something that we've always had at our disposal, students, learners, we can actually make this a lot more scalable. And I do want to say, I try to use the word learners more because I think student is more of a role, but we don't need to get caught up in semantics. But I think our learners are one of our, if not the most valuable asset we have in our classroom. And we need to empower them to help us in this journey. And that's going to make them so much stronger.
Amen. Amen. I think learners is right? Like we all are learners. Learners, it kind of goes along with the theme of what I think you're talking about, which is a broad approach, a broadness, a broad understanding of learning. And that's where I think we align very much so. My schools, that's how we define it, a broad approach to learning. Yeah. So really leveraging and allowing your educators to have the tools that they need to almost, I look at education as like prescriptive in some ways. You give the educator this understanding or power, or even things and tools like AI broaden their network of understanding. And then you allow them to make those human choices, those human connections to meet every learner's needs. And I think that that's very much where we can align in our thought. But one of the things I was thinking was, in your work in technology and really breaking down barriers for educators, I always think of the SAMR format, right? Of like uninformed pessimism in change, and that being the first barrier. Is there a way that you've discovered along your journey to remove that barrier or to soften that initial kind of, oh, I don't want to use this tool? Which is the standard, right? Like that is what you're facing most times when it comes to introducing tech to especially seasoned educators.
I've had great experiences with seasoned educators because ultimately a teacher who cares is a teacher who cares and they want to do the good things. So what I think we have to do is think about, really starting with that why we should introduce this into the program. And so I think that, and I think you've had other guests that have talked about this, implementation is definitely the biggest part of this. And, you know, I have a podcast and I had a guest, Dr. Katie Milkman, on, and it was so fascinating because she was talking about one of the best ways to really motivate and improve performance from someone who's struggling in anything, not specific to technology, but is to actually ask them for advice. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting, and I'm just, it's hit, you know, I just finished that interview, so it's kind of on my mind, but I'm thinking about, and we have to be so clear that we're never making people feel like they're not smart because technology is not something they're comfortable with. And so that's a huge, huge thing. And I think that if we could have more open conversations, you know, I need your help. Can you help me understand how someone who's struggling with this, like what would you say to a teacher who's struggling with bringing this in, and kind of almost get them on your team to help you make that. You're going to have to make some sales pitches to them first about why this is an important thing. But
so important.
I think if we can say, look, here's the thing we're trying to get to. We need to, and I'll just use like I'll stick with the theme of universal design for learning, because in universal design for learning, we talk about firm goals and flexible means. So here's the thing. We need to remove barriers for our learners. This software could do that by doing this, 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 and this. And so we think it's really valuable. What do you think about that? What are we missing? What else could we be doing? And maybe it's not even to do with technology, and really trying to get them on board, because there is so much wisdom in teachers who have been in the classroom for many, many years. And so they cannot feel like we don't value that. So how can we show that we have so much gratitude for all the wisdom and the knowledge and the experience that they're bringing? And now help us with this, because we have seen results. I've shown the white paper, or say we've got a white paper, or you know, like say we know others are having success for this. We believe it can be successful for our community. How could we do this better? Can you help us with this?
That's so true. That's so true. Sorry to interrupt.
No. I just think that that can help.
Yeah, no, and I think that I've seen a lot of success in working with educators on the ground of, like, you know, part of our philosophy is like leveraging the network effect, like taking great seasoned educators, let's say, and scaling them up and saying, hey, look, like we can get your brain in this and push it out to a bunch of people that can really help. And you could be just like 50 million other educators across the world and connect with them in a really meaningful way. And, you know, I wrote down power of scale in empowering your educators, right? And like making sure that connection is there. Now, talking about AI and talking about technology, which I'm sure you're like, yeah, I've talked about it too much. But, you know, GPT just released something really cool when it comes to voice mode. I think Apple's work now with Apple Intelligence blows my mind. I think that personal aspect to the AI that you're engaging with, how important, or let me ask you this, for the future, how important do you think it is now that AI will be something that can engage you in a contextual, almost emotional way to empowering educators or empowering classrooms with AI, but still keeping the human element?
Well, I think, you know, I really love Ethan Mollick's book, Co-Intelligence. I think it does a really beautiful job of talking about the role of at least today's AI, today's Gen AI. Like, what does this look like for us now? And of course, we always have to be that human in the loop. And is it going to be great when AI continuously and basically every day seems like it's better at needing less context from me because it's now actually remembering more about me?
That's right.
Which is great. I will say, and I have so much affinity for innovation and technology, but I also have a healthy amount of, okay, but how do I make sure that the human in me stays the human that is me?
That's right.
And so because it's very easy to get nudged to start to write differently or speak differently. And so I always want to just make sure that when I'm doing anything with Gen AI, that it's not polishing off my shine, if you will. Like I have a certain way of writing and talking, and I don't want that to be polished away so that it sounds just like anyone else. And I think teachers are going to feel that way about lesson design. It's like, okay, well, I have certain things that are really important to me, and I like to do these types of things. We have to design for universally, but are there things that we can still do to make sure? So that's my hope for Gen AI, is that it continues to improve without taking away what makes me, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. And I think you call out something that I don't actually hear quite a bit, is this very real possibility for people to start being defined by, AI, by something else that's creating amazingness, writing you the most beautiful, story or book or whatever, and then you assuming that role or personality. But I don't see that being any different as an Instagram account, where somebody's putting 500 million filters. In fact, I just made that connection in my brain right now. That's pretty interesting, to be honest with you, is, we're kind of putting this layer in front of us. And that could go either way. But I agree with you. I think the magic is human input, human output. In the middle, creativity can be inspired by AI. Ideas, organization, all of these things. One of the things I did notice about the new voice mode, especially in GPT, is the ability to see, not just vision through like camera and video, but actively see live. I think personally, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, like, I think that could be game changing when it comes to the personalization aspect. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think we're going to see one of the things that we know that it's really nice when someone can be like one-on-one tutored, but scalable, that's just not possible in a classroom setting. So I think we're still in kind of a rough state of it, but as these get refined, as these tools not only grow in capacity and capability, but also they start to get refined, and I am cautiously optimistic that the big tech companies and the companies who are loading into these large language models and who are looking towards the next thing, that they're doing it ethically. And then we're going to be able to trust, to some extent, human in the loop still, but that we could actually use these models to really help kids get a more personalized learning experience. Okay. And so we've seen this for a while with like adaptive software where, I mean, we could go to Khan Academy, but there's others that are also out there. And you don't understand this, okay, let me explain it this. And just how fast Gen AI is at taking a concept and taking it down a notch or ratcheting it up. That's like amazing. That's mind-blowing. The scalability is there. We're just going to have to be super smart with it. And like I said, one of the things, I don't work for Apple anymore, but I loved my time with Apple. And one of the things that Apple is really good at, in addition to accessibility, by the way, I've also worked for Google, and I love you too, Google.
That's a tough, like.
I know. And I actually did consulting for them both at the same time, but it's going to have to be a noticing of privacy. Like Apple is very dedicated to privacy. And so we have to be thoughtful about what are we feeding into these large language models that are capturing everything. And so there's a lot of digital literacy, digital leadership that's going to need to come with this for not only educators, but learners of all ages, small and tall. Like, how do we use these responsibly? How do we make sure that these are teaching us with accuracy, with integrity? And so there's a lot to think about, but it's so exciting. And I think it's going to have a lot of really good benefits. We're just going to need to be smart about it.
Smart. That's exactly right. And we'll get to that. Trust me on that. But what I would say is, you had said earlier that this isn't like that we've been having this conversation for a long time now. And that was kind of part of my journey, which is like when working with Alt School, we talked a lot about how one, we were documenting, we were, kind of leveraging the Reggio Emilia, Loris Malaguzzi philosophy around learning, this provocational kind of explorative experiential learning. Um, and we were thinking about, with all this documentation, with all this data, how can machine learning then inform based on a trained model, which is very similar. I mean, machine learning, AI, you're talking very similar realms. And the tech just wasn't there yet, more so the processing, right? And so now when I discovered GPT, I had that same moment of like, oh, wow, like that happened so fast, so fast. And now, once you kind of have an awareness of it, which I think most people do now,
Yeah.
the iteration is just mind blowing. And here's an example of how kind of I use, even in my own life, for even viewers and listeners out there, is I have a little trained GPT bot called Uni, which my daughter named, and Uni, unicorn, she's 6, my youngest. I'll set Uni off to the side in voice chat, and I'll say, hey, Uni, quiz her on single digit addition, or, phonogram words, and have her work on the phonogram. And you can hear them going back and forth. And that, to me, mind you, talking about privacy, I think like I'm an innovator, so I like to put myself in spaces where we don't have it all figured out, right? And my family too, like we all love it, but I think where that could go is really powerful. And I do love talk about Google and Apple. Apple always does it sexier. They always make it look really nice. And I think their angle on personalization that's private is just so powerful, because I do agree with you. Like, one, keeping a human in the loop, I think is like has to happen in every aspect of AI, right? Like of every aspect. And then two, like, I think if we can develop these closed loop systems, then especially Apple, it's like then they can be implemented in classrooms in a way where people that are super anxious and fear everything don't have to worry so much, because that information stays within the school system.
Yeah.
It's a super interesting world, isn't it? So talk to us a little bit. Currently, you've written a book. Let's talk a little bit about that. From my understanding, I'm trying to remember the name. Can you remind me of the name? It's Gratitude. I know it's
Oh,
Gratitude.
yeah. So the first book was Evolving Learner. The second
Yes.
book was Evolving with Gratitude. And then, like
There we
almost
go.
exactly a year ago, we released Bold Gratitude, which is an interactive and innovative gratitude journal. So, yeah.
So talking about gratitude, innovative learner is probably self-explanatory. Talking a lot about, gratitude, and, even in the title of your 2 most recent books, where do you see that playing into, one, future learning, and two, empowering educators to kind of be better educators when it comes to gratitude?
Well, I think that what we want to do is bring gratitude into our learning communities. It's going to improve well-being. It's going to nurture relationships. And then the thing that was just bananas to me when I started looking into it is it's actually going to activate learning. And so I really see gratitude as touching every corner of a learning community, because it is going to be bringing in that social emotional learning, the how are we nurturing those relationships, how are we good to each other. And it's also going to, I mean, we know it improves our physical health, our mental health. It's going to reduce stress. It helps us cope. I mean, like there's so many things. I could go on and on. But again, like the one that I was a little bit surprised about was the activating learning and just what it's doing in the brain when you dump those happiness chemicals, when you're getting the hit of the dopamine and the serotonin, the 2 neurotransmitters that are most commonly associated with gratitude. When you do that, the brain turns on, it activates. And so
Specifically the executive functioning, the real important stuff.
I mean, that it's gonna, the learning centers of the brain are gonna light up, and we're gonna be super excited. And so we can bring this into our learning communities. And one of the ways that I try and think about it is how can we do more inquiry-based learning, and how can we make it pro-social? So how can we do things that are,
Pro-social.
yeah, I love gratitude as a pro-social trend, excuse me. I love gratitude as this pro-social, profound emotion. And it's more than an emotion. It's a lot of different things. Yeah. So gratitude is this pro-social, it's profound. It's just really this amazing. It's why I've spent so much time focusing on it. And when we bring it into our learning communities, like I said, it's going to nurture those relationships, improve well-being, and activate learning. And so putting that into the context of inquiry-based learning, a lot of times we're just bringing things to kids and just saying, today we're going to learn about the plant cycle. Well, it's like, well, wait a second. Why do we care about this? And what do plants offer us? And why can we be grateful for plants? And when we approach it through a lens of gratitude and inquiry, I think we can get into a much deeper, more emotional connection to the content. And that's really where it's going to get sticky versus just, I have to remember this because I was told I need to remember this. So,
well, I think there's a co-creation there. There's a co-created experience with student and learner and educator.
no.
I'm going to correct myself now. But learner and educator, where it's very clear, right? It's very common sense, which is if you involve a learner in the experience and give them agency in said experience, all of a sudden, hey, you've got more interested learners because they have a role in it. When you're barking at learners, when you're talking at, if you will, of course, you're going to get the response. And unfortunately, I do see that as kind of the scaled experience in our country with brilliant educators popping up, here and there to really inspire kids to keep going. Our job is so important. I started my career as an educator. I taught for many years in a Montessori classroom. So already outside the box, right? But even there saw the need for education to be broader. But I know that, our job is just so important. And I do see a challenge, and I know that you've seen this challenge, which is the mass exodus from our field, whether it be early learning, which is like my whole world, or as you move on, even through college professors, we see this mass exodus. And do you have any insight on, one, why you think that's happening? Two, what is the solution there, or a few solutions? I'm sure there's a million solutions that need to happen, but where do you see that improving?
Well, I don't want to dismiss the monetary factor, and I do want educators to be paid a fair wage. And I can't help but think that if you have a combination of a learning community where the teachers do not feel appreciated and they're not being paid well, I would leave. Why wouldn't I leave? Right. So as humans, we crave that acknowledgement, some more than others. I'm probably a little bit too needy in the affirmation area, but we have to be able to make sure that everyone in a learning community feels seen, heard, known, and valued. That is our job. And if we're not doing that, we are not creating the conditions for learning. So how can we do that for everyone on campus, from nutrition services to our educators to custodial services, and obviously our learners? And learners could be all ages, but we really have to make sure. And I have seen people do this really, really well. In fact, we have a superintendent, Jerry Almaderas, who is the Santa Ana USD superintendent, and he does this beautifully. If you look at his social media feed, he is constantly shining a light on nutrition services, or a student that did something amazing, a community member who volunteered time, or something like that. So we want to make sure that everyone wants to be a part of this learning community, including families. And so how are we reaching out and making sure that our families know that they are valued? They were the first and forever teacher of their children. we want them to be a part of this. And so I think that when you do that and everyone feels like they're a part of this community, then we're all in it together. And it's not like the teachers working against what the parents are putting on them. It's like, no, we're a partnership. And so the families help because everyone in this learning community feels seen, heard, known, and valued. I think.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think the us versus them mentality in education has been brewing and rising, right? And I think I always think of us with them. And that partnership that you're speaking of is just fundamentally important for the child. There is no research that shows a decline in a parent partnership that's deep and meaningful in a child's life. It's only uptick, and trust me, we've looked. And I did write. You said like money's a factor, and if you're feeling underappreciated and underpaid, I wrote well, there's a place. It's called the entire United States of America, and
Yes.
that's the problem. Yeah, like every single educator in the public systems. There are some pockets, but for the wrong reasons, right?
Yeah.
Like the zip code reasons. Is I just had this conversation with my wife who's not in this industry, and she just made the correlation of hey, wait, Sterling Park down the road, they're a low income school. We just went there to do something volunteering for one of the classrooms, and my kids saw how dilapidated the building was, how hot it was in there because there's no AC, all of these things. And she's making that click of oh, they get less money. And I'm like, yes, and that's the problem. So talking about, your work with educators, your work with technology, but more so, I love the work when it comes to pushing forward simplicity now, mind you, I know that there's tools. I know that there's a framework that you've built to help, talking about an interactive book. I always think, especially with gratitude, journaling, things like that is just so important. What I love about what you're doing is the simplicity of breaking it down to, let's just start with the word gratitude, of how important that social emotional trait is, because a lot of times social emotional learning becomes words that and in a very kind of negative way become just more stuff that I always think of, like the Positivity Project and how great that is in thought, but then how it lands in schools is assembly. They put the word up and they talk about it. Talk to our listeners a little bit about how you see this alongside experience of promoting gratitude in an educator's life.
Yeah, I can even zoom out and just say, in general, with social emotional learning, one of my favorite examples is Inspire Ed out of Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. And that's led by learners of the younger ages, we'll say, but it's led by kids. And so I think I'll go back to what I said earlier. It's like how asking for advice, asking for help, this is what we need to do. Can you be a part of the solution? And when we empower others like that, they're far more likely to be engaged. And also they're going to bring different perspectives. So one of the things I love, whether talking about gratitude or just SEL in general, is that it doesn't need to be a week-long retreat or a week-long program. It can be very small things that have a big difference. So just to operationalize it, one of the things that I think about is CASTLE's 3 signature practices, which is welcome inclusion activity, engaging strategies, and optimistic closure. So for welcoming inclusion activity, what 2 to 5 minute thing can I do when I get a group together, whether it's adults or kids? What 2 to 3, 4, 5 minute thing can I do that will bring us together in some way to mentally, emotionally prepare us for what we're about to do? And I have so many different activities. Naturally, a lot of them to do with gratitude. In fact, the whole bold gratitude journal, while in a format for an individual to engage with interactively, come a lot from activities that I've done as welcoming inclusion activities or engaging strategies or optimistic closures. But for me, I had to get into the mindset of, okay, anytime I bring a group together, whether it's adults or kids, we're going to do these things. And it could be 3 minutes at the beginning. Obviously, we're going to do engaging strategies throughout. I hope we're never together in a situation where I'm just talking at people. That is an email. And then an optimistic closure, right?
Right.
So how can I, and sometimes people hear optimistic closure and they're like, oh, we have to like end on a positive. And I just, it's always so funny how the word positive gets weaponized. But the optimistic closure is about how do we reflect and move forward? How do we think about what happened? And it could be things that we need to work on. And it's also how do we move forward with intention?
Yeah. And I think for our listeners and viewers out there, apply that meta structure to a lot of what you're doing in the classroom, because again, always kind of bringing closure. When you think about educators, and I love what you had said earlier, which is, and I wrote it down, like educators that care are educators that care. And I think that's who we're speaking to right now. Is you're never going to get the, woe is me complaining everyday teacher to do anything. So like, I always think too, like, leaders out there, I'm a leader of schools, spend pretty much, I mean, there's ways in which, life will just weed those folks out and they'll get out of the career and maybe they go to somewhere else with self-awareness. Hopefully they do, but find those educators that care. A lot of times, if you're a leader, when you hire them, a star is a star. It's hard to train up a star. Like a star is like, oh, you've got it in your heart. And the funny thing is, Lainie, is that a lot of what I see in talking with educators is that stars tend to be driven by poor school experiences themselves. And just like you didn't thrive in the education system. So that gave you the empathy, right? The compassion for the future yous, just like me, that I don't want some kid in school sitting there feeling like he's less than X, Y, or Z because they're great at memorization. Like that, and especially how that applies to the world now. And that leads me to the big question that we ask everyone here. And I think, given your career, given your work, and given this conversation, I'm excited to hear. Lainie, I ask you, just like I ask every single guest, what is SMART?
Ooh, it's a good question. So can I go back really quick and just piggyback onto something you said? Is that okay?
Of course.
Okay. So I think that when you said a star, I think as long as someone cares about being there to help learners, I think we can help them. And so
they're
I
a
think
star.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I just wanted to elaborate on the definition of star because I don't want people
I
to
agree
think
with you. Yeah.
We're talking specifically about people who are celebrated all the time. You will see some teachers who get celebrated because the way that they shine is very visible to other people. And then that tends to exponentially brighten the shine. But what I love to do is, in addition to acknowledging and honoring those, is to look for the people who shine in different ways. And they don't need a lot of attention. And maybe they don't even want to be publicly acknowledged, but to make sure that they know that I see them, to make sure that they know that they're doing good work and that what they're doing is helping our learners. So I just had to rewind to that.
No, and I always think too of like Mr. Greenberg, which is we all have that one teacher, right? Like that was my one teacher, very, very understated. But when you got in his class, he painted pictures of Civil War and history in a way that just enthralled me, but never the showboater, right? Never out there doing it. So I'm glad that you clarified, and I very much agree with Lainie, guys.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so what is SMART? So I have to, evolving is in multiple book titles of mine because that's such an important word to me. Amen. And to me, the word evolving, it's an intentional, like I'm keeping the best parts and moving forward, right? It's not just changing, it's I'm keeping the best parts and moving forward. So someone who's smart is constantly evolving. They have this intellectual humility but they also question things because they want to make sure that they're understanding it. They want to make sure that the source is accurate. I think we're going to need to really, really lean into that. It's going to be this challenging of ideas and information in a way just to get to the best information possible, right? We're going to have to do that.
Totally, totally. And I love that you said humility. That is, it's been danced around, I think, on this show, but never just said, right? Like, it's really important, even thinking about somebody like Socrates, who said, the only reason I'm here is I'm the only one willing to admit that I know nothing at all. Like,
amazing.
That to me is where educators that are really touching lives and really making those impacts, it comes from a place of, yeah, but who am I? Like, because talking about it goes to curiosity. It allows people to be more curious. It opens the barriers. It knocks them down when it comes to embarrassment or anything like that. If you have an environment where the person that you look to guide you in the world goes, but who am I? You know what I mean? I think that's such a powerful thing, evolving as well. I don't know if you know Dr. Damien Bevel or his work. He did one of the first studies on one-to-one iPads and their effect on literacy in schools. Super, super smart guy. But he said, smart is contextual and evolving. So right alongside what you said. And I absolutely love it.
I think also, I've had an opportunity on my podcast. I get a lot of social scientists on just because that's something I nerd out about.
Me too.
And when I'm talking to like a Dacher Keltner, who is, founding director of Greater Good Science Center out of UC Berkeley,
so cool.
And he says something like, well, I've never really thought about that before. We haven't studied that yet. Or, he's not trying to come up with some answer out of thin air. The respect for, well, we need to look at that more, and the intellectual humility that comes with that. And it's been really, really fun having these conversations with professors from Yale and Harvard. And the intellectual humility is astounding. And it's very much something I want. I want to be able to be confident, but humble at the same time. And so
I have goosebumps because I've had a very, very, very similar experience talking to folks at Project Zero, close to Howard Gardner, and have the same experience. It's so great that I'm talking to you because it's so humbling to talk to some of the smartest people in the perception, right? In the world, right? And then they humble you with such a warm and welcoming environment of exploration and valuing. The biggest thing for me, talking about the 1.8 report card, is always that feeling of less than never left. It's just I've worked on myself more and more and more over time. But there's a validation in some senses of like, oh, that didn't matter. And I was right about that. 4 years of my life that I was so worried about. And it really doesn't matter. Like, it's what you can do. And it's the curiosity that you bring into the world and the humility. And I love that you said that. So, we always like to give you the platform at the end of the show as we wrap up here, to let everyone know, Lainie, where they can find you, where they can buy your books, where they can see you on social media, and then more so, because we have a lot of folks in the school system, how they can get you out to their schools, maybe their districts, to empower educators there.
I'd love to do that. And I will say that was not a complete definition of smart. And that is something that always changes. I would add to it, like, mentally and physically, like managing your health is something that you need to be smart at. Like, that's just something. It doesn't mean we won't ever get sick, but I think we need to be really good at managing our mental and physical health. I think we need to be positively impacting others. I think smart people do that. And not just those immediately around them, but actually making the world a better place. So
I love that. And I will add to that really quick is one of the best definitions of purpose that I've ever heard is spend your life finding what you are good at and what you love, and then figure out how it can help people. And there's your purpose. So I absolutely love that you said that. Anyway, continue. Let everybody know.
Yeah, so I would love to connect with people. I am Lainie Rowell across the web. Unfortunately, neither of those are off the top of the head easy to spell, but I'm at Lainie Rowell. I spend most of my time on Insta and Twitter/X, whatever you like to call it these days. And then I'm LainieRowell.com. So it's LAINIE and then Rowell like Powell.com. And I really do love getting into communities. So bring me out. I'd love to work with y'all.
We would love to have you out here in Virginia. That's where the show is at. And we're right in Loudoun County, which made it was very famous for a little while for the wrong reasons. But Lainie, thank you so much for joining us today. And listeners, viewers out there, thank you for joining in, spending your time with us, listening to us, valuing our perspective. Go check out Lainie's stuff. She's awesome. I can't wait, Lainie, to have you back on the show. We're going to have a summit soon talking about pulling the Avengers together, start having those bigger conversations together, and start driving things forward. I think it's just so important, the work you're doing. Please make sure to check her stuff out. From the Gardens Foundation and this wonderful show, What is Smart? Thank you so much. Tune in next time where we'll have another amazing guest. And we'll see ya. Have a great one. Mahalo.